Free to be me. This is an exciting inquiry, I think. So, I wanted to start with this recognition or this acknowledgement that what holds us back is social anxiety is part of what we've been talking about around the not really being comfortable with sharing who we really are because we're afraid we're going to be judged. We looked at shame and the connection with that. And then when we look at why we're not able to be just really free to be who we are and to express that to other people, what really gets in the way is our layers of conditioning. So we've been programmed and conditioned through our whole life through experience, and our primitive brain really notices things that are threatening or that we feel uncomfortable, where we feel judged or shamed, and we try our best to avoid that. But what happens is that covers up that light that radiates from our heart center. It covers up, we've talked about humor. It's hard to have a sense of humor when we're just kind of gritting our teeth and getting through it. And it covers up and distracts us from our being and our joy and our love, and also from just that authentic self sense of who we are, the authentic self. And when we're in protection mode, that's what we're in, is we're just trying to not be hurt. And we can get into that for decades through our whole life, really, in varying levels. And so sometimes it's more extreme and sometimes it's less extreme. But that's really the process that's happening. And it's really sad when we look at that and see how we betrayed ourselves through our life and how we've tried to fit in, but the price of fitting in is so high. And so in Braving the Wilderness, Brene Brown's wonderful, inspiring book about true belonging, she talks about how that we fight fitting in and grieve betrayal, and that our job really as adults who are healing from trauma is to honor that wild heart and to honor who we really are. And at the same time, to really see how we got into this situation so that we're not shaming ourselves. Maybe we're grieving our life and parts of our life and lost opportunities, but we're not shaming ourselves for it. So let's take a couple of minutes here. This isn't really the formal part of the inquiry, it's more just to see. So as you're kind of thinking back to what are the pieces of this for me? When did I form the belief that it wasn't safe for me to express who I am? What's your evidence for that? And as you're looking at evidence, remember that sometimes thoughts, words, and pictures can be really resonating in our body. We can tighten up, we can have all kinds of reactions to them. We don't want to get sucked back into memories thinking that that's happening right now. So stay oriented to yourself. You could do some tapping on your forehead, which is always helpful. Take some deep breaths. Notice your feet on the floor, that kind of thing. So, just on a high level, what are some of the pieces of your conditioning that you feel are really holding you back? And we get to this place where we can see, often, we can see the patterns, the pieces of the puzzle. And seeing it, being aware of it is really a foundational step for sure. We can't really change what we don't see clearly. And part of our defense mechanism might very well be to not see clearly. Certainly, that's been one of mine, to be in freeze or denial. So, one of the things that I wanted to just bring forward, and Erica Jong is somebody that people who are my age will remember as someone who kind of shook up the establishment with her book, Fear of Flying. And a couple of her quotes are, "If you don't risk anything, you risk even more." And that really kind of struck me as so true. When I look back at relationships that I've had that haven't really worked out into the present moment, a lot of what was happening there was that I wasn't real. I wasn't really authentic. And it's like my projection was having a relationship with the other person's projection, but there wasn't that really deep connection that we all really crave. So in order to be authentic and to really bring this into live action in our own lives, we need to be courageous. We need to know that it's going to take a while. Not everybody is going to be the right person. And Brene Brown talks a lot about trust. We need to find and test the trust with small things until we find the people that we can trust with the big stuff. And that our own mind is a lot of what the problem is, our own fears and anxieties, the inner critic, our doubt, well, maybe they wouldn't want to get to know me. And that's a lot of what we're looking at in the inquiries. But just to acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage. And if we don't risk being who we are, we're never going to be known. And so that's profound. If we don't risk really being who we are, we're never going to be known. So I'm going to pause here again and do a little bit of inquiry. So I believe it's true that we all want to be free and we all want to be securely attached because that's how we feel safe. And we can be more securely attached to ourselves, which is something new for most of us. Most of us have lived quite disconnected from ourselves. That's one of the major impacts of traumatic experiences is that we're disconnected from ourselves and our sense of value. So I think it's true that we all want to be free. We long for that. And we need it to happen in a way that's workable for us, where we could still remain attached to ourselves and to some core people and to some security, other kinds of security in life. So, as we look at these questions on here, are you living in alignment with your highest values? Referring back to how do I know who I am? How do I know what my values are? It's not that uncommon that we get so caught up in what society wants us to do, or we could take the working from home as an example during COVID. A lot of people assumed that they wouldn't like it, and they found that they do like it. A lot of companies assumed that it would never work, and now they've made it work. And they're finding that actually productivity is being affected by COVID-19, but not negatively affected by working at home so much. So there's a lot of things that we just kind of write off as, well, yeah, that's a pie in the sky thing. That's something that could never happen. So we need to be able to at least imagine, what are your highest values and what needs to change before you could risk that, before you could really freely express that. So as you're looking at that, keep really in touch with the present moment through your body, your breath. And we're not looking to shame ourselves. This is something where we're all somewhere on this continuum. And there's really good reasons if we were shut down and aren't really at that point right now. Are you living in alignment with your highest values? Do you need to do some work to look at what those are? That's also another step that is always helpful to do. And what's holding you back? And then we can use the structure that we use for inquiry to help go a little bit deeper in this, perhaps. So, some of the conditioning and the fears that we might have is that if we speak up, if we're really showing who we are, that people will reject us, we'll lose friendships. And I think we've probably all had experiences of that. Certainly, there's been people in my life that I've lost because I've been more real or because I've changed and they haven't, or those things happen to us all the time. But when we're afraid to be who we are, or we're holding ourselves back, we're kind of molding ourselves. This is getting into a little bit of codependence, which we're going to really look at next week. But if I speak up, I'll lose them. Or that question we were just talking about, who do you think you are? So if that has been the response to us when we've tried to express ourselves as children, especially, then we're going to have some pretty solid evidence that our real self isn't welcome. And that might be from someone who just yelled at us for laughing or having fun, or it could have been any kind of variety of different experiences with that. And sometimes it's abusive. It's like someone saying, no one's interested in your stupid ideas, just shut up. And then we just shut down. Or we maybe are able to be ourselves with some people, with our friends or something, but not with family. There's a lot of conditioning. So if you like the structure of putting all of that conditioning kind of outside of yourself so you can see it, it could be in front of you, on the side. The one we've been working with is kind of putting that over to the left side of your body. What's the conditioning that's there? And then one of the ways that we try to find on a deeper level what that conditioning is by using the reverse inquiries. So when we say these words, we're not saying something that we hope is true. We're saying something that we have a feeling isn't true. So I don't need to betray myself for attachment. If there's no response to that, maybe that is true for you. But for most part, there'll be some kind of like, no, that's not true. So there's two different kind of themes there. You could pick one or the other, or something else that's coming up for you. So another one would be, nothing is stopping me from living in alignment with my highest and most true values. And notice the response. It could be in words, it could be a feeling or a contraction in your body, just a felt sense that that's not true. And then just really pay attention to that. When I just said those words, I felt a bit of a heaviness in my chest. So I could go into that, or whatever it is that's coming up for you. Pick some words, these words or other words, as your inquiry. And then just for 5 minutes or so, we'll stay with this. We'll give ourselves a bit of time here. Stay connected in your body with your breath. And whatever the energy is in your body, ask it for more. Say, I'd like to know more about that. What's going on with that tightening? Or what do you know about that you could tell me? And there might be a lot of evidence coming up. I don't need to betray myself for attachment. Might bring up a lot of memories. It might be that you're judging yourself for doing that, or when you kind of went for it and were true to yourself and then you had a bad experience. So try to see the evidence as evidence and stay really in touch with this moment in time. So orient yourself to the room by looking around or hand on your heart, tapping. Stay here in this moment. And sometimes we might even let the inquiry come to a rest for a moment. Notice the environment around us again. We could notice that we're safe in the room, orient to ourselves. We could also notice just on an energetic level, what does it feel like to have that uncomfortable negative conditioning? If you're working with putting it outside your body, kind of imagining that all of those negative experiences, all the times when we did betray ourselves, all of the times we were hurt, and if it's sitting over there on the left side or sitting outside of your body, we can often feel the energy of that in our body. And we might be putting a lot of kind of structural stuff in there, looking, okay, there's this and this and this. And when I was this age, it was going like this. And we might have a lot of content in there that we could look at and maybe do some tapping on. Or the reverse inquiry can reveal what's going on, and then we can work with it, one piece of it or a few at a time. And how is that getting in the way of freedom? How are all of your experiences holding you back now? And then let the inquiry come to a close with something as big as our highest values and as being free. It's a not a one and done kind of an inquiry. It's usually will generate a lot of real richness that we can look at. And sometimes it might be that we notice that we're really condemning ourselves for how we've lived, or maybe we're feeling a lot of grief about that. There might be a lot of emotion here too. I know I certainly can look back on my life and see how it would have been so much different if I had healed earlier. And yet, that's not really all that productive, although it's certainly a normal feeling to have. So let's take a moment before we come back to the group to imagine into that freedom. I'm free to be me. I love myself. I accept myself. I know myself so deeply. And this is an aspirational thing, maybe. I'm free to be me anywhere, any place. I can just be who I am. And in relationships, what would that be like to be able to not worry at all about how the other person's going to respond when you show them who you are? Instead, there's that relief when the connection goes deeper. Like when we talk in class too, and someone says something really honest and everybody really responds to that. We long for this. We long to be free and intimate and connected. Let's take a minute to feel into that. Feel the steadiness of that, the groundedness. And then let's come back.